Welcome to Mystical Dispute, the limited Magic the Gathering debate podcast. I'm Garrett Gardner, aka G-Guards.
And I'm Carl Chase, aka 2Duck Cubed.
Check out our monthly bonus mini episodes on patreon.com/Mystical Dispute, and thank you so much to our patrons. And today, we are going to debate play boosters for limited Magic the Gathering.
Garrett, this is a meatier topic.
Yes.
Than we typically take on. Usually we're,
I thought you meant like a meteor like a meteor coming down, crashing and exploding the whole world. But I'll just change it to a meteor made of meat exploding, filled with meat.
Yes, that's exactly what I meant, as a meteor made of meat.
Okay, cool.
We're not talking about like the seventh best common that is whatever, do something that Garrett hates and Carl likes and cracking some dumb jokes while we're doing it, like about meteors made of meat. No, this is one that's got people up in arms,
screaming into the sky of meteors made of meat. And I gotta say, I'm one of them, Carl. I've been screaming like an old man shaking his fist at the clouds over this. If you haven't heard, what is it, like about a year ago, they divided boosters into a couple different types, including draft boosters and set boosters. Draft boosters being what we draft with normally, and they were basically what we're used to. And then set boosters had like alt art and extra rares and like extra cards from the commander set and stuff like that. And they were meant to just be cracked. And they've just announced that they're merging them into one draftable pack that has less commons, more uncommons, a slot for a foil, and a slot for a card from the list, they call it, which is like a bonus sheet, kind of. And I'm not going to go into the details because I don't actually know the 100% details of them, but they're quite a bit different than what we're used to. Yeah, and up to 4 rares. Although, to be fair, it's like less than 1% of them will actually have the full 4 rares, but there's a chance for 4 rares. And there's probably a pretty decent chance at 2, I think, it seems like. So, much different approach to how we draft now and how we've drafted for decades now, with the same amount of commons, uncommons, rare, and then maybe a double face card or something like that and a bonus sheet, but not too much deviation from there. But Carl, we're going to approach this Mystical Dispute episode like a real debate, like a debate club or something like that. Like literally, we're going to take different sides and argue against each other. And I'm telling you this now because I'm pretty sure I'm just basically directly in line with Carl, but I am making the ultimate sacrifice and will be arguing essentially the opposite of my point in the spirit of debate.
If there is somebody that's going to take one for the team in this podcast, it's Garrett, and I appreciate that. Also, though, because you don't have 100% full belief in your points, I plan to slaughter you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to earn additional points for being the hero here and arguing the other side of this thing. So without any further ado, let's get right into In This Corner
Opening Takes.
Well, actually, I have one further ado. That's how you say that in response to with no further ado.
Okay,
I have a further ado, which is the reason that Garrett is going to take the opposite point here, is because there are plenty of people, including some well-known folks in the limited community, who are essentially on exactly what Garrett is going to argue here. So Garrett is, by proxy, representing that group of people.
I will do my best. I earnestly will do my best with that. And so my take being that I think that this is not the sky is falling news, and it actually could be a positive improvement on the draft experience.
Yeah, but do you believe that, though, Garrett?
In my heart, no, it's up. The shield is up. I've got it. This is me. I need to win the debate, Carl. So I love it. I love every moment of it, and I'm going to crush you. I'm going to tell you just how much better it's going to be.
Okay, and my take is that I'm skeptical. Yes, I have for a very long time said that one of WotC's biggest strengths is limited design and development, and I still believe that. However, this is very clearly not a change made by those that are doing limited design and development, and everything that they are telling us is essentially damage control and trying to live within the bounds of what has been given to them.
Fair enough, Carl. Well, I think it's time to
debate it.
All right, Carl, I will start us off with a point you probably can't and won't disagree with, which is that even though we know what the changes are, you can find the graphic that shows the breakdown of what the cards will be in the packs, we don't actually know what that means for limited yet. And we won't until the set actually comes out. And this actually is related to the point that I like to make at the beginning of formats. It's like you don't know. You don't know how it's going to play. You don't know what the synergies are going to be. You don't know if it's a great format or a terrible format before playing it. So this one's not even me really putting on the mask here. It's like literally my point. Like we don't know what it looks like. Even if there are 4 rares in the pack, they could change what rare means from a limited design perspective. It could not be the bombs. You know, I think people think rare equals bombs, but that's not really even true in any limited format, let alone in this one. They could even make them less powerful on average.
And you see a little bit of that too right now with some of the mythics being, I think, more EDH targeted.
Yeah.
Like Will and Rowan, for example, in WoW are basically a 4-2 and a 2-4 for 3 in limited and do some crazy powerful stuff in EDH.
Yeah. Exactly. And so we could see more designs that have that sort of overlap where it's like fine and limited, but it's really targeted for EDH, but it doesn't really do that much to change things. So again, I think we're probably in agreement here, but we don't really know how this will play out until it plays out. So I think that it is best to reserve judgment until then, but I also don't think that means that we can't make guesses or have feelings about it.
Garrett, I've got a little bit more of a direct rebuttal to that point in my second point. I want to set something up first.
Okay.
To do so, I'm going to read a tweet that Mark Rosewater made in reply to some people asking questions on Twitter today. He said, "If we didn't do anything, draft boosters were going away. This whole change was to save drafting and other limited formats. Mark, don't piss on our face and tell us it's raining." From Mark's perspective, that may actually be his entire experience.
It probably is. Like, if we're being honest, he probably had to fight tooth and nail for this change to keep Limited alive. It's like, I actually think it's probably true.
And to some extent, I respect that, because any of you out there that have worked as part of a publicly traded company, especially a large one, any individual person does not have the reins. Mark's not making all the decisions at WotC. It's just not how things work.
Yep.
And I respect any fighting that was done by Mark or others to try to preserve Limited, like a lot. I respect it a lot. Here's my issue, is that this just reeks of a decision that was made at the top of the house, and potentially even one that was made with very limited information. Like, hey, the set boosters are outselling draft boosters by 5-1. We're going to kill draft boosters. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but it could literally be as simple as that. And hey, if there's extra expenses associated with producing the draft boosters and the set boosters because of whatever. I don't know the specifics of it. Or, hey, we think that the sale of draft boosters is eating into our set of set boosters, so if we just have the set boosters or play boosters in this case, we'll sell more. Or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It reeks of a decision made at the top without full respect and understanding of the history of the game. And to some extent, I think, without full understanding of some of the things that have helped to create longevity in Magic. And so when you are coming out, and to some extent you are still the face of the company to those that you're talking to, and you literally say, hey, here's this thing that it might end up being bad for you, but don't worry, I saved you from it being worse. Just don't say it.
Yeah.
Just don't say it, period. As the person receiving this information, it just feels like absolute bullshit. It feels like, hey, we know this thing is going to suck for you, but it could have sucked a lot worse. Ultimately, here's the thing. I don't even know if it will suck. Like I said in the beginning, I'm still part of Team Skeptical, but not ready to make a definitive decision here. But it's this kind of thing that just makes me feel like the chances that this decision was made with a lot of
consideration,
with anything in mind, outside of short-term profitability, not even long-term profitability, or not the user base long-term, it feels substantially higher when you see comments like this.
So, Carl, you put me in a tough spot here because I feel like I am happy to argue in defense of these play boosters, but I just don't see a defense of the messaging and business strategy here. So I guess I feel like I'm really abandoning my post here. I will still argue in favor of these, and I think the counterpoint to that is like it might not be bad, and in fact there's reasons that it could be a good change and an improvement, but I have to say that I agree that the messaging there was not great.
No. And I think furthermore, it's like the specific word choice, this whole change was to save drafting. I mean, come on. Drafting does not need saving. You've got Moto Super Qualifiers that are capping out at like over 600 players. You've got massive engagement at tournaments like the Open Tournament in Las Vegas. They literally changed Arena Opens to only limited because clearly that was generating many, many orders of magnitude more engagement than the constructed formats were. Literally anywhere you look, everybody's drafting, everybody wants to draft. There's very few players that are not at least interested or engaged in draft in some way, and it's generating, I mean, you look at the volume, like the fact that you can go on MTG Arena and hit Premier Draft, and your queue fires within like 25 seconds every single time is crazy. That means 8 people want to draft every 25 freaking seconds of the day. Draft does not need saving. And anything else, I mean, I made the joke of don't piss on our face and tell us that it's raining, which is not the phrase, but I don't care. It's a lot funnier that way. But that's basically what it is. Like, we've seen them do this thing where they just pretend like limited doesn't exist despite massive popularity. And I don't know if it's because they believe that more focus on constructed formats increases the secondary market value, and the secondary market value increases sales of boosters, or whatever it is. I'm sure there's some economic reason, but it all feels short-sighted. Drafting didn't need to be saved. Just that phrase just clearly sent me. I mean, this is probably about as angry of a tone as you have heard me use on Mystical Dispute ever.
And I do think that it's justified, but I guess I should add that Maro did send a follow-up tweet where he clarified a little bit, but to be honest with you, the follow-up tweet kind of just said the same thing in less dramatic terms. So I'm still I'm on your boat here.
For some reason, Mark Rosewater, you ever listen to this? I like you. I don't like this messaging.
Yeah.
You are cool, and you have done a ton for Limited. You've done a ton for Magic over many, many years, and you seem like a good person. I do not like this messaging at all.
I want to be clear here. I think that it's okay to criticize a company's PR person's statement without criticizing the person or even, the company in an angry way. It's just like you can go too far with it. I don't think you just did. And I do think like many people can go too far, but that is not what we're trying to do. There's no personal attacks and no vendetta. It's not like angry
not.
here.
And I will never do that.
But it's just fair criticism, I think. And I don't know, we're on a debate podcast. Like we're ranking it up to 11 here. We usually kind of play a little bit safer. I think, though, in this case, with that messaging, it's fair.
It was a terrible tweet.
But, Carl, let's circle back to the actual contents of the play boosters.
Yep.
And I will give another point in defense of this new proposed strategy of having like a combined draft and set booster. So one of the major changes that they're making is that they're actually reducing the number of commons that are in each pack in order to make room for all this extra stuff, including the rares and the bonus sheet and the foil. But in order to compensate for that, they're actually reducing the number of unique commons in the set by like 20% or so. And so I'll tell you my gut reaction to learning that there was going to be less commons is like, well, with less commons, it's going to be less like limited, or it'd be more like cube maybe, which, I think is a fair bit between limited and constructed and not something that I personally enjoy. So I had a negative reaction to hearing that there's less commons, but if they print less unique copies of each common, it might not have any effect at all, or it might actually make the commons more interesting because you can guarantee that the same copy or that a pair of commons will come up in a draft more often. And that could really reward invested players who they know, like, if I take this blue common, there's another artifact that will work really well with it in the common slot. And I have a very good chance or higher chance of getting one. Even though there's less, there's more copies of it. So we might see an interaction like that to really reward the in-depth competitive players.
And, we don't know, because we don't know if that change will essentially basically keep the common frequency that exists now with more common slots, just having fewer slots. Like if it's 20% fewer slots and 20% fewer commons, I mean, you might have fairly similar frequency of a common existing in a particular pack. Mm-hmm. My direct counterpoint to that, though, is it puts a lot of pressure on the common slot if you've got a higher number of higher powered uncommons and rares in a set. Now, do we know that that's actually going to be the case? We don't. Could they power down rares? Could they power down uncommons? I mean, maybe. I'm a little skeptical skeptical there too, but it puts a lot of pressure on the common. Garrett, I hate to break it to you, but your beloved vanilla 2-2 for 2 probably gets a lot worse in this environment. You know, we joke about it. It has been certainly trending that direction over a number of years, but it just more generally, I mean, let's take a current limited comparison point. A card like, say, Red Tooth Genealogist, which is a 3-mana 2/3 that creates a royal roll. If you're comparing that card to something that's a power level of, I'm switching sets here. Adeline, a card from, what was it, Midnight Hunt, that's 3 mana, X4, and it makes tokens when it attacks, and it has power equal to the number of creatures in play, and it's just like a massive limited bomb. But if all of a sudden you've got 2 or 3 cards that are closer to that power level in the pack, Red Tooth Genealogist looks like hot garbage. And I think that is potentially one of the bigger challenges for the limited design team, is to navigate through some of that and keep commons as relevant as they've been in the past. Or maybe they don't need to. I don't know. Maybe it's fine, and maybe we have decks that are out of your 23 cards that you're playing. Maybe it's 16 rares and uncommons. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, and I guess that, that ties back into my first point, that we don't really know what common versus uncommon versus rare looks like. I mean, it's possible that there's just going to be an uncommon. I guess it's probably unlikely, but there's a possibility there's an uncommon 2-mana 2/2 that doesn't really do much else in this environment. Probably not, but I could see something like, I don't know, the Frostbridge, the 2-mana 2/2 that you pay 3 to tap something down in the uncommon slot if they power it down enough, especially if they give enough payoffs for tapping or something like that in a new format. Which brings me to the next point, which is that uncommons, they're actually printing like 20% more unique uncommons in each set. So there will be a higher diversity of uncommons. And uncommons, I think, are kind of the peanut butter and jelly of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich of limited. They are what brings your deck from like fine to powerful. They pay off for synergies, but they also are more efficient, and they tend to be like limited focused cards. So with more copies of uncommons in a draft, for instance, they're not powerful enough to be first picked a lot of the time. So they'll go like third or even fifth pick sometimes, even if they are fairly limited powerful. And so this can really reward a competitive player as well. If you are in the right lane, if you have read the signals correctly, you're going to be rewarded with more copies of different types of uncommons, in addition to a possibly more diverse format, just by having these uncommons fueling more synergies and possibilities with the draft.
Garrett, I'm staring at this graphic that they put out with the announcement talking about like the collation of the packs. Mm-hmm. And at the bottom, there's this little green star that just says may contain booster fun. What the hell does may contain booster fun mean? Sorry, I got totally distracted by that, and I don't know what the hell to do with that.
Yeah, it means something. I think it means that sometimes there's some crazy thing there, but I am not actually totally sure.
You know what's booster fun right now is drafting. That's what booster fun is. I'm literally just shaking my cane at the sky right now.
I know, I can see you shaking your can, and I'm trying to get you to calm down here, but in general, it just means there's probably different copies of weird cards. So there's just going to be more surprises in the draft. It'll be more like a chaos draft than a normal format, which could add diversity, Here's
my concern with all this. There's a part of me that wants to just say, you know what, Carl? Don't worry about it. Because, like I said earlier, and I've said many times, the limited development and design people are really, really good at their jobs. It's like the show Chopped, where they give these cooks like a basket of a mango, some like sardines, some exotic type of peanut butter made out of like shrews, and a gallon of milk or something, and then they have to make like a dessert. To some extent, I feel like you could give Dave Humphreys a Chopped basket, and he's going to figure out how to make out a good draft set out of it, as well as many other people there. But my concern is whatever is said right now, and hey, maybe we're going to make sure that the amount of uncommons and amount of rares, like the power balancing on those versus the power balancing on commons, is going to work itself out. And again, our limited development design people are going to make sure that works for draft. But that's now. And like I said before, what WotC has proved is that they will make decisions that are in the best interest of short-term profits. And you know what might be in the best interest of short-term profits is bumping the crap out of the power levels of uncommons and rares and mythics are in that slot, and maybe putting even more of those in there to try to boost sales. And so I have absolutely zero faith that one of these days you're not just going to be getting like 3 full bomb rares in every single pack, and it's going to just bastardize the draft experience. I hope not. I hope that day doesn't come, but I am skeptical.
All right, I do have a direct rebuttal to that into my next point, which is simply that I trust WotC to not do that. Like, yes, they can make these poor announcements and they can word it poorly, but like the people who are there, they really care about the game.
They do.
And specifically, we have now experienced how many years of some of the best limited formats we've ever seen? Most well-received, consistently great. There have been almost no limited formats that people think were below average even, like maybe 1 or 2, but like in general, there was always people, me, who would defend the ones that were a little underrated. In general, the limited designers are so passionate about making the best possible limited format.
They are.
And I think that needs to be called out here. Like, yes, you're right. Like maybe they'll get pressure, but I think, despite the awkwardness of the announcement, like they will fight for the sanctity of limited, and I think they'll win. I think that they'll be able to figure it out and make good, exciting limited formats with these new requirements. I don't want to call them constraints because it could just be like a way to shake things up, a different way to shake up the philosophy. And that being said too, like it's possible it'll take them a little bit of time to figure it out. Like the first couple might be a little bit awkward and then they'll be like, oh, maybe we need to do this, but it could improve over time. And a lot of the time, I don't know, when I get stuck on a creative project, what I like to do is like totally change up the requirements for it. Like take a totally different visual approach or something to a design that I'm making. And I think that can give you a new perspective. And that feels like what this could be. So I see your concern. I'm just saying that if you have that concern, you also have to have the hopeful hope that this change is a positive thing, that they'll be able to do things in limited that they've never really been able to do before because it opens up a lot of creative space for them.
I so desperately want to believe and really hope that everything you said comes true. And to some extent, Garrett, I'm kind of an optimist at heart. My nature is to trust. My nature is to generally be optimistic and find the best out of situations. Even when I'm frustrated, I still lean towards that. And so, man, I sure hope everything you said just holds true and we continue to get some of the best limited experiences that we've seen recently. But like I said, I'm skeptical.
Well, Carl, I think that we could move on now to
closing arguments.
I think if there's one deep from my heart take that I want to say, maybe not to any of our listeners or you, Carl, but to myself, is that we don't know what it looks like yet.
We don't.
We don't know how it's going to play. We don't know how overpowered or underpowered or frustrating or imbalanced or any of these like negative things you can think we don't, or the positive things. I guess we don't know any of the positive things. That's why I liked arguing for the positives, is because they're just as likely, if not maybe even more likely, because of how great the limited design team is, to happen than the negative things. So it just doesn't make sense right now to make that judgment call. And it won't even make sense, 2 weeks into the format, 3 weeks into the format where they institute this change? Like, you're going to have to give it some time. And then not even that, but I think you got to give at least a couple sets, because it could be a problem specific to that set. And like maybe the next one will be an all-timer. Who knows? So it behooves you to just stay optimistic about, I don't know, I assume one of your favorite games, if you're listening to a goddamn podcast with two dweebs yelling at each other on it, it's got to be dear to your heart. So why not hold out hope for it to be great?
Or it could go the other direction and the first set might be okay. And then a year from now, they've let it go. And again, we're in Paxer for EDH players mode. Here's the thing, Garrett, and you know this probably more than our listeners do, but I'm kind of a hater of haters, typically. Like, when a change comes out and everybody's like, the sky is falling, I am way more often like, would you stop worrying
just
about
stop
it's fine.
whining.
Nothing doesn't matter. For the most part, I'm like, it'll work itself out. This one, I'm really nervous about. I mean, honestly, for the first time in like a lot of the changes they've announced, outside of, I think, this as well as some of the competitive play announcements, what I've been pretty negative about, those are really the two that have created a lot of skepticism in my soul.
I think it's fair to have that skepticism. I just think, and I know you will do this, but I hope everybody still gives it a chance. And also, I do think, like, looking through Twitter, a lot of people seem to think, like, oh, this could be good, or it could be cool. It could be, at least not bad. So I don't really think that what you're saying is impossible, but I'm hoping that it's improbable enough to not happen.
There was a long period of time where the only drafting that I did was cube drafting for about a 3-year period where I was kind of on hiatus from regular limited. And if it turns into cube drafting, I'm sure I'll still do it. And it's not going to get all the way there anyway. So it'll be fine. I'm a nut when it comes to limited. I'm sure I'll still play it regardless.
Well, you heard it here, everyone. Carl is a nut. That about wraps it up. Like a nut, like in a little wrapper. So thanks for listening to Mystical Dispute. You can support the show on Patreon.com.
Man, that was rough.
Mystical Dispute. I'm Garrett Gardner. You can find me at twitch.tv/gguards. I've been streaming every Monday and Thursday.
And I'm Carl. You can find me listening to Garrett's strong jokes here on the podcast and on Twitter at 2duckcubed.
Shout out to 17 Lands for the Data. You can support them on Patreon as well. Until next time, even in the face of adversary, stay chill.
Adios.
Making a podcast with you, it's all right.
It's all right.
Yeah, it's a solid 6 out of 10.
Magic is medium.
Magic medium, Wilds of Eldraine, fine, whatever. Making a podcast with you, extra medium.
Oh, I should close my door. Hold on.
Slightly better.
I'm out of water. Hold on, I'm dumbass.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll just talk about.